Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you for having me today and joining this webinar. I'm very pleased that I will be able to share some of my knowledge with you. Also, I really hope that you are fine and safe and basically eager to learn something new of this meeting. Um, Today we are going to talk about different migration types and how, as a QA engineers, we can test them. Our agenda for today's webinar will be as follows. So first of all, we will talk about the general definition of what migration is and what is its types. Next, we will talk about migration testing, again, its definition, its phases, and some important points and notions that any QA engineer should keep in mind. And next, we will go into some details regarding data migration testing and application migration testing, its levels, types, and some information and important points here. And we will conclude our webinar with migration testing risks and challenges that any QA engineer dealing with a migration project may face with. And at the end of the webinar, definitely we will have some time reserved for any questions or comments you are going to have on this topic. But basically, before we can actually get started, let me briefly introduce myself and tell a few words about who I am and some of my previous background. So my name is Vasylyna Bryhadyr. I'm working as a senior QA engineer at Forte Group company. I am a part of their Ukrainian team based in Ternopil. I've been working in the field for more than 7 years now, and 6 of which I've been also a mentor, a lecturer, and also a speaker at different IT events. In particular, I'm co-curator and lecturer of the software testing fundamental course held by Forte Group. For about 5 years, I also acted as a team lead for small-sized QA teams, and among others, I am also I'm certified in Agile testing by ICAgile International Organization. So I think starting that point, we can go to our first stop of our journey today, and it will be regarding what migration testing is. So like the general definition and the general notion is that migration in information technology field is a process of moving data or like some kind of software from one system or operating environment to another. Basically, depending what will be the object of migration, or basically what we are going to migrate within our migration project, we can define at least these 5 migration type. The first one, and it feels like already a buzzword in information technology due to how often it is mentioned in different sources, will be data migration. And it is a process of moving our data from one database, which is usually referred to as a legacy database or source database, or basically old database, to a new one, which is our destination. The next one will be the application migration type. Like basically the same process here, with only the exception that we are going to move our application or some of its components, some of its features from one environment or like one technology to another one. The third type is server migration, and it is where we move server data and server configuration from one server to another one. For example, we can migrate from Windows to mainframe server, or so on, right, depending on our business needs. Next one, and it's sad to be one of the most difficult migration type on the market right now. It's operational system or OS migration. So that when we migrate our application from one operation system to another one. For example, we can do that from Windows to Linux or Mac or vice versa. And the fifth and basically the last on our list today will be hybrid migration. This type can include few or even all of the previous movements we just covered. And also its peculiarity will be that it could also involve both cloud and on-premises solutions. Basically by cloud, we mean some cloud vendor that we are going to use. And by on-premises solution, we mean some local business servers or local business solutions. Now, when we learn some of the most popular and most widespread migration types, we can move on and see what will be the phases of migration testing, same as phases of like whole migration process. So first phase will be pre-migration testing, or basically pre-migration planning. So here is where we are going to define like the whole scope for our testing. Generally, it's considered to be one of like most time-consuming and probably difficult phase, but definitely it will be one of the most critical moment within your testing process. So here we need to learn and study our old or like legacy system, both as our new destination system. And based on our learning findings, on our understanding of both of these systems, we should be able to define our testing strategy, our test plan, and basically to define and create what test scenarios we will need to run for this migration. More about different points and different questions that you need to keep in mind and ask yourself, your team, research about the systems you are working with, we will cover like a bit later in this webinar. Meanwhile, let's move to the second phase, which is migration testing phase itself. So here is the phase where like most of the fun will be happening, right? So here we are going to run all the tests we created on our previous phase. And we will need to ensure, right, whether the data and application is migrated correctly, whether all the business and user scenarios can be executed on our destination environment. Also, if we are going to refer to data migration, we will need to make sure that all our data allocated within like the proper places on our destination database. The next one and the last one on this slide will be post-migration testing. It will happen when our migration has completed, right? And here we will need to make sure that the whole migration process was executed correctly. And we will need to run a set of follow-up tests that would definitely include some full cycle regression testing. We will also need to check performance and stability of our destination environment. We will also review some security of our destination environment and make sure like no security issues or vulnerabilities were created. while we were migrating our software. Now, when we know all of these phases, I think we can move on. And our next stop on this webinar will be questions, right? And questions we need to ask and information we need to get while basically planning any migration testing for any migration type. So first of all, we will need to understand what is our migration process at whole, right? So how it's going to be organized, what migration tools are we going to use, right? Whether it will be some purchased from the market, or it is something that is customly built by your organization for this specific migration. Next will be the scope of the migration, right? So like for any other type of the project, we need to know the scope. We need to know what we need to test. We need to know if there are any out of scope items that we are either not going to migrate at all, or we as a QA team, as a QA engineer, are not going to take care of for this migration. Next is regarding some time constraints, right? So how long will the whole migration process take? So what are some deadlines, milestones, thresholds? Definitely, while planning our testing, we need to possess all of this information to do our tests timely, right? And just to stick to the agenda we have for this specific migration. Next one is regarding human resources that are going to be involved. Basically, what are the parties involved in the migration and what are the responsibilities? Usually migration is a quite a complex project, and it requires a lot of people, different teams, and sometimes some vendors from the market just to perform the whole migration. And it's really important to understand what is a piece of responsibility for each team, for each person, for each vendor, just to be aligned, just to understand what are the specific expectation, right, to you personally and to your team, and basically to understand who to reach out should you have any questions or issues during the migration. Next question here that is also really important is regarding what are the acceptance criteria for a successful migration, right? So without some clear checklist of items, it will be pretty hard to understand at what point we can consider our migration complete, when we can consider our migration successful, and same applies to the testing effort, right? We need to know what level of work will be considered enough, right, to complete the testing, and what criteria can be used to judge whether our testing for this project was successful or not. Next is regarding what are the test environments, and specifically what are the systems, tools, accounts, accesses, permissions, and other notions that you will need for testing. So that is quite an important point, but usually you could miss that question at the beginning and just get back to it when it's maybe a bit late, right? So usually depending on your organization size, your organization policy, it may take from few days to few weeks just to get the permission or account you need. And if you request that too late, it may eat up some of your testing time. Also, speaking, for example, about data migration, like you understand that you will need to have access at least to two databases. All right, first one will be the legacy database, and second one the destination database. But again, when working with data, most likely you will need some VPN clients installed, some remote virtual desktops set up to work and access the data, some specific accounts, some specific permission. And it's really nice just to gather and put down all of these items as a list and just take care of them and request all of these like a few weeks ahead before you need to start some actual test execution. Next, and the last question on our list today will be regarding any test documentation for the legacy system, which you can reuse for the new one. This question will be especially helpful if you are totally new person on the team, right? And you have no idea how the legacy database was structured and how it was working. So at this point, such information and test documents will be really helpful, right? Just to understand what was tested. And you will be able to pick up some wallet tests that will still apply to your destination database and like not create them from scratch and like not do some overwork, right? But have some tests already created, like with the need of some minor modification. Definitely, this list is not exhaustive one. Depending on your project, on your migration types, there can be some more question you may need to ask. But these seven, right? This 7 question will still give you like a good ground, right, for discussion, and just see what else information will be needed for you just to plan your testing activities. Now, once we're done here, let's move forward and let's talk about the data migration testing in particular. So that is a testing that is conducted to compare migrated data with original data to make sure it's migrated as expected and uncover any errors, discrepancies, some potential data losses when moving data from like one source to another one. Depending on the project size, depending on the size of the database you are going to migrate, your team, your data engineering team may either use some tools for like automatical migration the data, or they can do that manually by extracting the data from the source and just putting that into destination. When speaking about the data migration testing, we also need to know and remember that there can be at least 2 levels of validation that you can do. So first one will be the data level validation. So here you basically work with the data and make sure that what data you see on your destination database basically reflects what you had on your source database, and there is no discrepancies, like no gaps, no errors, and so on. This level of validation will include like 3 sub-levels. Let's call them in this way. So first one, and it will be like the most basic tests that you can do, is row counts verification. So for example, let's assume that we have a customers table on our source database. with a total count of like 100 unique customers, right? So the very first test that we can do on the destination table is to make sure that the same number, right, the same 100 of customers is present on the customer table upon migration. The next sub-level will be data accuracy verification, and it is usually done on some sample, like selected sample of the data. If we take like the same example with customers table, for example, we can take like the first 5 customers, the first 5 rows of the customers table within our destination database, and just to make sure that all the columns, all the customers data is the same as it was on our source database, right? So there is no gaps, no duplication, like any unnecessary data inserted. Basically, it should like reflect and replicate what we see on the source. The next and the third, the next sublevel will be entitlement verification. What we mean here, right? So we just need to make sure that configuration and setup on the destination database is created, right, updated in such a way that migrated data can operate correctly there. So for example, right, you may check some stored procedures and make sure that those are either updated or modified, or some new stored procedures are added on the destination, just to replicate all the operation and like all the configuration that the source database has. The second level here will be the application level validation. And here we do some tests on the application side. We basically make sure that the application is still running smoothly with all the migrated data being in. For example, if we migrated some customers, right, some users, we may log in as a migrated user, and just to make sure that like visually all the data, all the account settings are still present there, and they haven't changed or lost during migration. Next is regarding question that we need to ask while planning our data migration testing. So first it will be regarding what is the existing database structure or schema, right? What is a new database structure? And what's important, what is the mapping, right? How we are going to like map the data, which is going to move from one database to another. That is really important to understand that, right? How data is like data relation, how it's going to be connected, just to plan your test cases in a proper way. It's really nice if such information is already documented, right? And there is some data schema you can review for both databases. There is some mapping file already created again that you can review. But from my experience on many projects, it's either totally absent, or like these documents are not complete, and it can be like pretty hard to understand something from them. So the second option is that you may find the person on the team. Most likely it will be someone from data engineers, right, who can walk you through both databases, show you around, provide you information how everything is organized, like for you to get some clear picture. But even in case there is no such person on the team right now, or like you are not able to reach out to them, you still able to do some exploratory work, right? You can just review both databases and maybe put down some notes, document, create and document some schema, which can be later used by you and your team and probably other team members within your migration project. Definitely, it's not like the easy and straightforward way to do the stuff, but again, you will just need to see what resources you have at hand, what is the situation at your project, and like react accordingly. The next question will be regarding like the data itself, right? So for example, can all data be migrated? Or for example, there is any data like your business is not going to migrate, right? Knowing that may save you some time and you won't just like create tests for some data which is not even on the migration plan. You can also ask if there is any is there going to be any data transformation before or even during migration to destination database. So and the same question will be right regarding can any corrupted data or invalid data be fixed or eliminated during migration. So those questions are like they come from the fact that usually business use migration not only like migrate the data and replicate on the destination everything they had on source, but also like do some cleansing, do some modification, right? And for you, it will be important to know, right, whether the destination should be like one-to-one replica of the old system, or while migrating, some changes will be done, and you need to understand what changes are those, how you are going to test that. And it definitely needs to be on your test strategy and on your test plan. Another two questions, and like the last on our list here, will be related more to the migration process itself. It's regarding a backup process for any migration losses and a rollback process for any migration failures. So what benefits this information gives you? So first of all, you will be able to be more secure about some data or about some changes you do, which can be backed up or rolled back, should they not go well. And you will be like more cautious and more careful with some data or changes that like can be deleted forever, right? So it's also important just to have the list, right, of such insecure, right, dangerous parts, so that you would be able to be like super careful while working with them. Now let's move to our another type of migration testing, which is application migration testing. And here we are going to compare, right, our migrated application or its specific features or components with your legacy application. And again, this will be done to uncover any faults, any discrepancies, any errors, like notify and fix them in a timely manner. If speaking about the nature of application migration itself, we will be able to define like at least two types of application migration. So first one will be when application is upgraded to a new version. So for example, if you have an Angular application and you just going to migrate, or like in other words, to upgrade it to the newest version of Angular. The second type will be happening when your application is migrated to a totally new technology, right? For example, you can migrate your application from Angular to React or like any other framework or library. Knowing that, there are some questions will be like specific to application migration testing that you need to like source the information. This will be regarding some functionality in the old application, which is not supported in the new one, right? And like when you understand that there will be such unsupported items, you need just to get the information like what your business is going to do with that, right? Are we going to simply like remove it and no longer support that in the new application? Or for example, we are going to like to do some custom development and or like source some custom solution, right? Just to still migrate and support these features in this new application. The next question will be if there are any differences or like any enhancement in the new application, right? So usually like new version of technology or like new technology, they may have like some additional features, some novelties, right, that your old technology or old framework didn't have, right? And usually business may want to enable some of these like new features during on post migration, and you also need to understand that, right? So usually it may be like a separate project or like another phase of migration, but there is some such cases where like migration and also adding some new features from this new technology may happen in parallel, and like you should be aware of that and plan your work and your testing accordingly. The next question is regarding, is there any functionality that needs to be transformed during migration? So basically the root cause is same here. Sometimes business uses like migration process not only to replicate everything you have on the old system, but also just to make some enhancements, right? Just to modify some features they wanted to change. And that needs to be kept in mind by the team and especially by the QA engineers. Next question is regarding some sources of knowledge that you can use to understand the application to be migrated from a functional standpoint. Again, it will be the most crucial question to those people who are totally new to that application, right? That you haven't worked with it before, and you just need before making sure migration is successful, you just need to understand what you are going to migrate, right? What the application, what it does, what are its features, its purpose, and different project documentation, different test documentation, different people, like talking to different people, all the team should be able just to provide you all or at least most of information you need. Another question that will basically derive from like sources of knowledge will be what areas of the application the most critical and most important to business and most important to customers. So this information will help you to prioritize your test and taken you are limited in time or you are not having enough human resources just to do the full migration testing you plan at the beginning, you will be able at least to focus on these most important and most crucial items. And the last question here, which is probably can be a topic for a separate webinar, will be regarding how automated testing can be used during migration and post-migration phases. So on the high level, what I can say here is that during the migration phase, it will be pretty hard to have a lot of automation, with the exception for like unit testing done by developers. But for other levels of automation testing, it may be like really hard to maintain and get like a lot of profit and benefit, since while migrating something, data or software most likely will be quite unstable and flaky, and supporting automation in this phase will like eat you more times that it will bring you some benefits. But again, depending on what you migrate, right? There definitely can be some specific components or some specific features that will not expect to change during migration, right? So should you know that such components and such functionality is present in your migration project, you definitely can involve some automated testing for this component, right? Just to make sure those are stable, those are not accidentally changed, and so on. And regarding the post-migration phase, definitely there will be much more capabilities for you to involve like different levels of automation testing. Right, since the data or software is expected to be like more stable, right? So again, if automation is already like was present on your legacy database or like legacy application, there are definitely maybe some tasks that you can already update and restructure to work on the new application, or you can just define some new scenarios and some new approach, automation approach for your destination, right? Your new application or like new database. So we are like halfway through our webinar, so probably let's move on. And here will be like the last point and like last piece of information that I prepared for you within the slides, but I really hope that we are going to have some good discussion later on. And this last point will be regarding some migration testing risks and challenges. There definitely can be a lot of them, but like I will try to go over some to my understanding and to my experience, like most popular, right, most widespread, and such challenges and risks that you are likely to face while working on like any kind of migration project. So the first risk and the first challenge is that you may like totally underestimate your migration. So like first thing to remember here, that like any migration is always very complex, right? The second thing is every migration is going to be unique in its own way, right? Especially if when you already has some experience and you did some migration in the past, you may have such feeling that, okay, I've worked on many migration, I already know and tried a lot of stuff, and that may play a bad joke to you, right? And you may be trapped, right? Your first perception on some new migration project you're going to work may be misleading, right? So due to that, you should always invest a lot of time into a thorough planning of your migration testing, right? Just to evaluate your migration properly, to understand like what skills, expertise, people, tools, and so on, and especially tests you will need to run, just to make sure this specific migration is successful, right? The next risk is insufficient analysis of the required migration scope. So it's somehow resembles and extends what we have just mentioned, right? So if the scoping isn't done correctly, like on the project level, when you define what needs to be migrated, same on the testing effort level, when you define what needs to be tested, right? So that may lead into migration being done totally untimely, not in a timely manner, or in proper way. Next challenge, right, is scattered migration team landscape with different, and quite often it will be external parties that are involved during the migration. Pretty often migration, like as already mentioned in the webinar, is done with many people. That may be different people and teams within the same organization, or sometimes business like source some vendor to do a migration for them, but they still like allocate some internal resources just to monitor, overview, and collaborate, right? And it can be pretty hard to align, right? Who is responsible for what, like evaluate what expertise is needed. There is like some level of effort duplication where like different teams may be like doing the same work, not knowing that, or some blank spacers or gaps in the effort when each team thinks that another team is doing that, and it happens that like nobody is doing that. So it needs a pretty good process, right? Communication process, team organization, just to align all the people, just to make sure every activity unit for migration is performed, and like dependencies are clearly traced, and like people, like every person on the migration team has everything like they need for their piece of work to be completed. Next risk and challenge is using some customly built tools in order to migrate the data. These points can be like quite arguable, right? And many people can argue that having a custom tool built specifically for your migration, for your application, it can be like pretty huge benefit. But there is a pretty big concern that some customly built tools may have some severe programming errors that may result into some accuracy or security issues, and some like most popular from the market vendors like provide much more like secure and stable and reliable tools for migrating purposes. Next challenge and risk is pure data quality. Also from my experience, sometimes some dummy data can be used for like testing any kind of migration. And like the biggest risk here is that like every test, like the whole testing may pass on test environments once it's done with dummy data. But when it comes to real data on production, there may some issues, some problems may emerge. And due to that, it's important to have your test data as close to the real data as possible. Next risk is insufficient knowledge of the source system. We also have covered that a few times in this webinar, right? So pretty often there is like little to no documentation for a source system, or they may be outdated, or they may be incomplete, and it could be like quite hard to understand how the source system works, especially if the first time you touch base with that system is when you are supposed to test its migration. So here you also need to work and just to find any possible source of information that you can use to plan your testing. Next is lack of acceptance criteria that provides the threshold for a successful migration. We already covered that within some questions block on the previous slide. But again, there should be like a clear acceptance criteria list for like basically for the whole migration and for like each specific level of work, just to be able to judge, right, when the level of effort is enough, when this or that task is completed, and whether it's completed successfully. And insufficient documentation of the migration itself, right? So pretty often migration can be done, but no migration document are left for this migration, like no mapping files, no like business requirements, no functional requirements, no test documentation. Due to that, it can be pretty hard just to work through any like future migration, right? Because with this document, you just have no prerequisites, right? No understanding of how it's usually done within this organization. Plus, with no migration documents, it will be like pretty hard to review the whole migration process afterwards, and just to figure out, eliminate any gaps or any issues, right, that were happening during the migration itself. Yep, so at this point, we just went over everything I've got prepared for you within slides, but let's move to the probably most dynamic and most involved part of our webinar. It's question and answers section. But also feel free to reach out, like connect and reach out to me on LinkedIn, on Facebook. We'll be willing and able to share some information should you have any questions to me. Okay, so probably let's see our chat first. Yep, so there is some question regarding the recording. I guess it's more the question to like organizer, right? But as far as I know, Quality Assurance Group always provide recording for the webinars. And some good question from Alessa. First one, how to select data sample which need to be verified. So it's a good question. From my experience, sometimes you can just take some top, like top 5 to top 100 records. It's like not a perfect approach, but again, it's like some criteria of how you can select some sample and some data set for testing. Another approach is regarding some time period, right? So usually when we migrate data, we migrate it for like some historical period, right? So that will be definitely some real-time data and will be data for example, for the last 5 years. And usually the most recent data is like the most important and the most crucial to the business. So for example, you can check the data for the like recent full months or for the recent full year, right? And to make sure that this most up-to-date data is all correctly migrated. Yeah, so next question is regarding which test design techniques are most popular to be used in migration testing. So probably I won't be able to name you some specific test design technique. It will definitely rely and depend on the like application you are going to migrate, right, or data you are going to migrate. So like there can be, like, depending on the application type, there be like any of the test design technique. From my experience, what I was using on some of my migration project, so it was state transition, just to understand, for example, how the user is going to go through the application, what data they are going to produce, and basically what data needs to be like migrated and present for these users, depending on the flow they perform. Also, it's pretty useful sometimes to use decision table, especially if you have some like categories of data or some software or application, which output depends on different combination, right? You can like define that and have that at hand, right? So you won't be just guessing that, right? But you will have a clear artifact, right, that you can use. And next question: which migration tools which migration tool can you advise? So again, it probably depends on like what migration you are talking about, right? There is a huge set of tools for each specific migration type. For example, on my recent project, which also included data migration, we were using Power BI solution from Microsoft just to automate some SQL queries and just to catch some bad data, and like that, and provide it in a format of a clear report, which later could be analyzed by QA team or shared, for example, with the business, with development team, just to see what data is wrong and what SQL query captures that. Is a broad snapshot data is perfect for testing and migration, or it has some bad sides? From your perspective, of course. So by broad snapshot, right, some real data, definitely there can be a perfect solution, but the overall idea is that having some broad snapshot is better, right? And having the real data available for testing is also better. Because, right, it's replicate what is going to be present on production, and once you will be able to like first verify how it will look like on your test environments, like capture and fix some issues, it will be better. But the most problem may be here with like getting that broad snapshot of data, right? Like defining what data should be, right? Because should it be? Because again, as it was questioned, how to define what subset to use for testing here is pretty relevant, right? You need to define what broad snapshot you should use for what period, to make sure this snapshot like reflects, if not all, but at least most of like business requirements and business rules that you, like your organization, apply to the data. So yeah, it's in my understanding and the overall idea, it's much better to use a broad snapshot, but you just need to be aware of how this data needs to be selected. Because if you select the wrong data, even from production, it will give you like pretty same bad result as if you like use some manufactured dummy data. Hope I answered your question. Sorry for probably a pretty long reply. Should you have any follow-ups regarding that, like feel free to text that or just speak up by voice. Also, pretty good question. Do you have any fuck up stories regarding to the migration process on your experience? Basically, probably almost every migration I was involved has some kind of fuck up stories. And that was like QA team fuck ups, my personal fuck up, or even like some overall project team. But as mentioned, previously in the webinar, there was a case where different teams were involved within the same migration. That was some teams from like one vendor, some teams from another vendor, like basically a lot of different people. Like there was some like sync up issues, and almost at the end of the migration, it appears that some crucial components like was totally missed out of sight, and like nobody either on the development team or QA team take care of it. And definitely it was like a bit stress, and we like need to extend the project timeline just to cover for that gap. And like it was like totally uncomfortable and like unpleasant stories, but like such things happens. Okay, one more question. So recently my team completed migration process. Described problem is right and clear, but we haven't used it. It's a pain. Could team restart migration in the middle of the process or try to complete according to the original flow? Basically, yeah, I understand your pain. And regarding the question, if you are able to restart the migration, my latest migration I was involved in, we were forced basically to restart the migration from scratch because some of the key vendors and some key people who were working and like initiating this migrating like had to accidentally leave the project. At this point, there was like little to known artifacts. They like leave for new people who were joining the team. So like basically we were forced to restart, right? To start with migration planning again with these new people in place, and just to plan and see what we can do with this totally new team setup. So again, it's possible, but it's much better, right, to do everything at the beginning and only for one time, right, and do not do any like extra moves during the migration process itself. What type of migration did you perform on your project? Basically, some migration types I've worked more often and have more experience as data migration, application migration, and like hybrid type, combining these two. Basically, that is the migration type I covered in more detail within the webinar. Since I feel I'm like have more experience and some hands-on practice with this migration type, and I'm not confident, right, to speak about some migration types that I haven't performed myself, right, and have only some theoretical or very limited practical experience. Okay, so we are already like 3 minutes overdue. I see there is no more question as of now. Should you have some, please let me know.
I'm sorry, I have a last question if we have some kind of 1 minute.
Yep.
So I'm not sure it's about QA, but the question is when we're planning such migration testing, is there any security points for data migration and some tests for it or something like this?
Yep, definitely such like security matters should be kept in mind, right, when planning like migration testing. Personally, I wasn't like deeply involved into such security testing. My part was mostly functional part, right, and making sure the data is smooth and present on the destination. Same for the application, right? So that wasn't something that I did, right? But there are definitely other people that could be either on data engineering team, that could be a separate like QA team or QA team member, who will be able just to trace any potential security risks that are currently on the source table. Just think through how these issues, right, can be, for example, eliminated or somehow fixed during migration. And also they will be able just to review the whole process, right, the whole migration process, so that you won't create any like additional security vulnerabilities or issues while migrating the data or application. So yeah, security is definitely something that you need to keep in mind, either by yourself, if there is no other specific person on team dealing with that, or like collaborating with them and just taking a look, right, what they are doing, how they are doing, and like learning some stuff from them.
Okay, I get it. Then one last more. Am I right if I said that, for example, Alibaba Cloud, they have their own SSL certification for it? And if they have, and if we buy this opportunity with the security thing, we don't need any test from our side for it. They will cover by themselves. Or you don't have any practice with this?
So I'm basically haven't worked with that specific SSL provider, right? So I'm not sure about their ways of working and what service they provide. But I think when you basically purchase that certificate from them, right, you can clarify that point, right? Whether they are going to provide some like security, like testing or security checkup, right, for the certificate for your application, or if not, maybe they can like guide you what specific points you can cover, right, and what you should check like within your organization.
Okay, thank you so much. That was helpful.
Yep, you are welcome. Okay, so 1 more minute for any late questions. Otherwise, should you have any like follow-up questions? Sometimes they appear like hours or days after some event. Yeah, feel free to connect on the social media shared, and we can definitely have some follow-up discussion there. Thanks all, you were a great audience. It was really nice to spend these hours with you. See you all, and stay safe.
Thank you, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you, goodbye.
Thank you, goodbye.